Hey everyone. Welcome to AfriHeart Stories, your go-to spot for African tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe and drop a comment. Now sit back and enjoy. Zina Okafor had always believed in fairy tales. From the moment she met Chuka at university, his easy smile and confidence made her heart race. They studied late into the night, sharing aspirations over steaming cups of coffee and stolen glances. When he surprised her beneath the old mango tree behind the library with a single red rose, she felt as though the world had shifted. A few months later, he knelt before her in a candlelit courtyard at his family compound and asked her to marry him. Their wedding was a lavish affair. Soft music filled the air as Zina walked down an aisle strewn with white petals. Friends and family wept tears of joy as Chuka lifted the veil to reveal her glowing face. "You are my future," he whispered. Their first dance was a whirlwind of satin and grace. Every step still felt beautifully choreographed by fate. In the first weeks of marriage, Zina believed she had entered paradise. Chuka was attentive, bringing breakfast in bed, gently scribbling love notes on stationery, and calling during the day to check on her. He left the gifts by her bedside, a novel she had mentioned, a silk scarf, a handwritten poem. "I love you more every day," he'd say, pressing his lips against her forehead. But beneath the sweetness, a subtle chill began to settle. One evening, Chuka returned home late, his tailored shirt wrinkled. Zina greeted him with a warm smile and a gentle kiss, but he barely returned her affection. He shuffled into the study and slammed the door. "Are you upset?" Zina asked, stepping inside. He glanced at her, eyes cold. "This isn't about you," he snapped, voice edged with frustration. She watched him stare at a stack of bills, knuckles white around a pen. She said nothing. The next morning, Zina noticed bruises on her wrist where Chuka had accidentally bumped into her in the hallway. She dismissed them, a clumsy mistake, she thought. But when he pressed a washcloth to her arm, his apology felt rehearsed. "I didn't see the table," he mumbled. She believed him. Everyone believes love hurts sometimes, she told herself. Gradually, the bruises became harder to explain. A torn sleeve here, a spilled drink there. Zina rehearsed plausible excuses: doorframe, coffee pot mishap, clumsy descent on stairs. She covered up with makeup and long sleeves. To the outside world, she and Chuka remained the perfect couple. Smiles at dinners, affectionate gestures in public, synchronized vows of commitment. Yet each night, as Zina lay awake, she studied her reflection in the darkened window. The shimmer of wedding bands felt heavier by the day. The fairy tale had already cracked, and Zina stood at its edge, terrified of what lay beyond. She replayed every moment, searching for a clue. She had misread his kindness, but now memories felt tinted with betrayal. Tomorrow she vowed to seek the truth even if it hurt. Heart racing. She prayed it would not end in tragedy. Zina sat at the kitchen table, slicing tomatoes and onions for a simple stew. The late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting intricate patterns on the countertop. For a moment, the aroma of spices and simmering broth offered a soothing refuge. Chuka had been in a good mood all weekend, taking Zina on drives and bringing her small gifts. She had begun to believe that maybe things would improve. That evening, as Zina carefully arranged the stew's accompaniments on a platter, Chuka's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting abruptly. "Zina," he snapped, voice colder than she had ever heard. "Where is my charger? You must have moved it." "I put it on the desk this morning," Zina replied softly, wiping her hands on a towel. "I can get it for you." "Don't patronize me," he growled, rising from his chair. He strode over to the desk in the living room, rifling through papers. Zina's heart pounded. When he turned back, his eyes flashed with accusation. "You're useless," he spat. Before she could respond, his hand flew up and struck her cheek. The slap echoed through the quiet apartment. Zina's taste of metal filled her mouth as tears welled. She pressed a trembling hand to her face, fingers brushing warmth where skin met skin. Chuka's face twisted with regret almost immediately. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. He reached out but she recoiled. "I didn't mean to." "Go away," Zina said, voice flat, numb. She rose and retreated to the bedroom, heart hammering like a drum. She collapsed onto the bed, pillows in her arms, and cried until exhaustion took over. That night, Chuka lay beside her, watching her breathe quietly. Every so often he whispered apologies. "I was stressed. I'm under pressure at work. It won't happen again." Zina stared at the ceiling, mind racing. She wanted to scream, to demand he explain why he hurt her. Instead, she buried her face in the pillow and prayed the lie would stick. In the following days, Chuka was attentive, brushing hair from her face, kissing her wrist, sending good morning texts. He insisted it was an accident. I lost control, he confessed, eyes red. I never want to see you hurt. And Zina forced herself to believe him. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the slap. The tight sting, the look in his eyes before and after. She touched her skin, willing the bruise to fade. In the bathroom mirror, she studied the faint purple mark. She whispered to her reflection, I can forgive this. I love him. The next morning, Zina applied makeup, hoping to hide the bruise. She greeted F at work with a smile, but F paused, concern in her eyes. Zina laughed loudly, covering trembling thoughts. But deep down, fear had taken root. Zina lay on the sofa, dim light from the television flickering across her face. She had returned from work late, hoping for a quiet evening. Suddenly, a soft knock sounded at the door. She paused, heart fluttering. Visitors always felt tense now. She rose slowly and opened the door to reveal Mama Ife, her elderly neighbor, leaning on a worn wooden cane. Good afternoon, my dear, Mama Ife said gently, stepping inside. Her keen eyes swept over Zina's face. I came to check on you. You didn't return my call yesterday. Zina managed a weak smile. I was busy at the co-op, she replied, voice faltering. Mama Ife's gaze settled on a faint discoloration near Zina's temple and the slight limp in her step. Did you hurt yourself? She asked, voice calm but insistent. Zina's throat closed. I tripped, she whispered, tucking hair behind her ear. But Mama Ife shook her head, concern deepening her wrinkles. You know you can tell me anything, Mama Ife said, placing a gnarled hand on Zina's. I'm retired. I have time to listen. Zina looked into the old woman's eyes, filled with compassion. She realized she could not hide forever. Tears welled. Before she could speak, the front door rattled. Chuka stood there watching them. His brow furrowed. Who's here? He demanded. Mama Ife straightened. I came to see my friend. Is there a problem? Chuka's jaw clenched. No problem. He stepped aside, allowing Mama Ife into the living room. Zina watched, heart pounding. As Mama Ife rose to make tea in the kitchen, Chuka approached Zina. Why is she here? He growled quietly. Zina opened her mouth to lie but shook her head. I invited her, she said, voice steady. She was worried. Chuka's gaze flicked to her bruised wrist, partly concealed beneath her sleeve. His expression darkened. In the kitchen, Mama Ife poured hot water into cups and slid them to Zina. Drink, child, she said softly. Zina sipped as Mama Ife leaned in. This isn't a bump from falling. Tell me what happened. Zina's eyes filled. She glanced at Chuka standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. Her body trembled. Gathering courage, Zina whispered, Chuka, he hit me. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Mama Ife's face hardened. She placed the cup down and marched to the door. Where is he? She demanded. Chuka's shoulders stiffened. In the living room, tension snapped. Mama Ife's voice rang out, You will not lay a hand on this child again. Chuka paled but did not reply. Zina watched, stunned by Mama Ife's fearlessness. For the first time she felt a spark of hope. Mama Ife returned to Zina's side, resting a gentle hand on her arm. You are not alone, she said firmly. Zina nodded, tears rolling freely. That night, Mama Ife stayed until Zina drifted peacefully asleep, whispering softly. Zina closed her eyes, heart lighter than before. The day of Chuka's promotion arrived with fanfare. Zina stood at the grand entrance of Bright Tech Solutions, clutching a small bouquet of orchids. Chuka emerged from the glass doors, beaming in a crisp new suit and polished shoes. Colleagues gathered around, offering applause and congratulations. Mr. Damiani stepped forward and shook Chuka's hand firmly. Congratulations, Chuka, Dami said with genuine warmth. Your leadership on the Lagos expansion has been exceptional. Chuka's chest swelled. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without Zina's support at home. Zina blushed, glancing down at the orchids in her hands. A reporter snapped photos, capturing smiles that hid deeper truths. That evening, Chuka hosted a celebratory dinner at their favorite restaurant by the river. Candles flickered on the table as river breezes brushed the veranda. Zina admired the way Chuka's eyes lit when he recounted boardroom victories. He raised his glass. To new responsibilities and greater heights. Guests echoed, to Chuka. As plates of jollof rice and peppered chicken arrived, Chuka leaned in. Zina, I want you to wear that blue dress. You look radiant. She placed her hand over his. It's been a big day. He kissed her fingers. For a brief moment, the mask slipped, and she had the husband she remembered. But later, as they walked home, Chuka's phone buzzed with demands. He stopped and stared at the screen, jaw tightening. "You should have reminded me about that email." Zina shook her head. "I had no idea. You didn't mention it." Chuka's voice dropped. "You always forget." He grabbed her arm, twisting until she winced. He released her suddenly and marched ahead, leaving Zina to follow in his shadow. Back at the apartment, Chuka retreated to his home office. The walls were lined with accolades, the mahogany desk immaculate. Zina hovered by the door. "Can we talk?" she whispered. He didn't respond. She stepped inside, heart sinking at the sight of his tense shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she began. He turned, eyes glazed with exhaustion. "Are you?" he asked, voice rough. "Or just saying it?" Zina's breath caught. She swallowed. "I am," she said firmly. Chuka's frustration exploded. "Stop lying," he shouted, sending a framed certificate crashing to the floor. Zina stumbled back. Glass shards sparkled like dark confessions across the carpet. Seconds later, Chuka's face fell. He rushed over, picking up the frame. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice low. Zina remained frozen. The memory of the celebration now fractured. She realized that in every triumph she risked being blamed. Triumph had become a battlefield, and victory tasted hollow. Later that night, Dammy accompanied them home. Outside the car, he turned to Zina. "You look tired," he observed. She forced a smile. "Long day." He nodded, watching her closely. In the parking garage, Zina brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, concealing a fading bruise. Dammy's gaze flickered to the mark. But he said nothing and let her pass. Zina exhaled in relief. Zina sat in the bright community hall, surrounded by humming sewing machines. Her friend from the co-op, guided her through needle threading. The clatter of bobbins and rhythmic stitching offered a rare sense of purpose. Zina's hands moved with surprising confidence. At home, Chuka had dismissed her interest in sewing as frivolous. Here, Zina felt alive. During a break, leaned forward. "You're doing great," she said softly, adjusting Zina's posture. "Have you thought of selling your designs?" Zina's heart fluttered. "I want to. It feels liberating." Smiled, but her eyes darkened with concern. "Be careful. Some husbands don't understand." Zina swallowed. Would Chuka approve? He had crushed her first cheap machine in a fit of anger. She had begged him to buy a replacement, but he refused. The thought of returning home to his scrutiny made her stomach twist. That evening, Zina's heart raced as she wheeled her old machine from the hall to her apartment. She entered quietly, praying Chuka would be out. Inside, she found him reviewing documents in the study. He glanced up. "You're late," he remarked, voice tight. Zina froze. She swallowed. "Just finishing up a project." Chuka frowned. "What project?" Zina hesitated. "I've been learning sewing with F." His face flushed. "Sewing? Why waste time? You belong here with me." He shoved papers aside. Zina's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. "Don't argue." He stormed off, leaving Zina clutching the satchel containing her machine. Heart pounding, she retreated to the bedroom, unpacking the device. The machine was small, barely used. She laid it on the desk by the window. Moonlight glinted off its polished surface. Zina reached out and stroked the metal, drawing strength from its promise. Days passed. Zina practiced secretly, creating simple pillow covers and hemming dresses for neighbors. Paid her in bits of leftover fabric, each scrap a reminder of her secret skill. Zina began to envision a business. Custom tailoring in their community, using profits to build independence. One afternoon, as Zina stitched a delicate lace trim onto a sleeve, the doorbell chimed. She dropped the needle. Dammy stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "I forgot these documents," he said, handing a folder over. His gaze fell on the sewing machine. For a moment he studied Zina. He tucked an errant hair behind her ear. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. Zina's breath caught. It's mine," she whispered. Dammy's eyes softened. He nodded and stepped back. "I'll see you tomorrow at the office?" he asked. Zina exhaled, hope stirring. As the door clicked shut, she realized her secret was safe, for now. That night, Zina placed a thread spool and paused with faith. She closed her eyes hopefully and pictured a future stitched together by her own hands. The machine's hum echoed in her mind, promising softly each stitch mended more than fabric. It mended her spirit. Zina rushed out of the sewing co-op as soon as the clock chimed 6, heart hammering in her chest. She darted away from the comforting hum of machines and into the sunlit courtyard, then froze. Her phone wasn't in her bag. Panic rose in her throat. She sprinted back inside, weaving between rows of electric needles until she spotted F at her station. "You left this," F breathed, extending the smartphone toward her. Zena snatched it gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing it to her chest. But as she turned, F hesitated, brows knitted. "I saw the photos," she said softly, holding up the screen. Zena's stomach sank at the sight of bruises, purple blooms on her cheek and forearm. "You shouldn't have looked," Zena said, voice trembling. F shook her head. "I had to know. Are you okay?" Zena swallowed hard. "If Chuka finds out." F's hand tightened on Zena's shoulder. "He won't. But I need to help you." "How?" Zena asked, eyes brimming. "If he discovers I told someone?" "Listen," F said, lowering her voice. "Mama Ife gave you that panic button. Use it. Then we document everything, dates, times, witnesses." Zena swallowed the lump in her throat. She dug into her robe pocket and produced the small device, no larger than a button. "If I press this, it alerts a volunteer security line," F explained. "They'll call the police if they hear you're in danger." Zena's fingers curled around the plastic disc. "But evidence?" "We'll collect it," F vowed. "Inspector Boma told me survivors have rights. We'll photograph injuries, record threats, keep copies hidden." Silence hung between them as Zena processed the plan. For the first time in years she felt more than fear. She felt resolve. That night, Zena lay in bed with the phone glowing on her nightstand. She drafted a message to Inspector Boma, hands shaking. Then deleted it. She opened a secure note and began typing bullet points, dates of beatings, bruises mapped to calendar days, overheard threats. She saved the document in a hidden folder. Under her mattress, she slid a USB drive containing the same files. Every detail she typed felt like a stitch in a patchwork quilt of survival. When dawn came, she awoke with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She touched the panic button lying beside her pillow and realized she was no longer alone. For the first time, Zena dared to imagine a future reclaimed from silence. Monday morning, Zena stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom, adjusting her navy blue sheath dress. She painted her lips a soft rose, camouflaging the dark bruise near her collarbone with the neckline. Chuka's promotion party at Bright Teka's headquarters would be the toughest test yet. She had to pretend everything was perfect. At the front door, Mama Ife slipped Zena a discreet envelope. "Just in case," she whispered. Zena tucked it into her clutch, nodding. Stepping into the chauffeured car, she practiced her brightest smile. The party hall gleamed with glass chandeliers and polished floors. Colleagues mingled over champagne flutes, toasting Chuka's success. As Zena greeted engineers and analysts, she felt the weight of every eye. When Damiani approached, greeting her warmly, Zena faltered. He studied her face for a heartbeat too long. "Zena," he said, voice low, "are you all right?" Zena returned his gaze, smiling serenely. "I'm fine, thank you." But Dami's eyes flicked to her collarbone. Zena forced her posture straighter. He excused himself with a polite nod. Moments later, Chuka appeared, draping an arm around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said, lips brushing her cheek. The crowd gathered to photograph the perfect couple, but Zena felt exposed. During dinner, Chuka regaled guests with tales of boardroom victories. Zena listened, sipping water. Across the table, Dami caught her eye again and offered a small, sympathetic smile. Zena's heart leapt, but she looked away quickly. On the drive home, Chuka quizzed her about her sewing co-op. "How's that going?" he asked. Zena swallowed. "Well," she replied, "I'm designing a summer collection." He grunted. Don't waste time." His tone carried a warning. Zena hummed in response, staring out the window. Back at their compound, Zena slipped into the kitchen to retrieve her sewing machine from the back room. Chuka appeared behind her, voice tight. "You never learn." Before she could answer, his hand crashed into her back, forcing her into the wall. Pain shot through her ribs. She bit back a scream as he released her and stormed off. Zena pressed her palm to the bruise forming along her spine, fighting tears. The facade of the perfect wife shattered, but behind her smile she was planning her escape. Zena's nights were sleepless. She lay in the dark, listening for every footstep outside her bedroom door. Mama Ife's panic button rested on her nightstand, a small beacon of hope. She slipped from bed at 3 a.m., heading to the guest room where Mama Ife waited. "Something's changed," Zena said softly, voice taut. Mama Ife pressed a kettle on the silent stove, pouring 2 cups of chamomile tea. Tell me, she urged. Zina exhaled. Chuka's violence is escalating. He nearly broke my ribs last night. Mama Ife's face fell. We need a plan. Before dawn, they gathered F and Inspector Boma in the shadowed kitchen. Boma, in plain clothes, listened fully before nodding gravely. Zina, the panic button is good, but we need a protocol. If you press it, Dammy or I will arrive within minutes. You need a code word. Zina practiced, red rose. Over and over, she whispered until it felt natural. Chuka will never suspect a phrase about flowers. F and Boma distributed identical buttons to Mama Ife and Inspector Boma, each synced to the same hotline. Zina pressed hers experimentally and heard a calm voice on the line. She hung up, heart pounding with relief. At breakfast, Chuka glared at her cup of tea. Why are you up so early? Market research, she replied, voice steady. He snorted and left. Zina watched him go, hand brushing the pendant under her dress, her secret lifeline. That day at the co-op, F slipped her a small notebook. Record every incident, no matter how small. Dates, times, words. Zina nodded, pencil poised. When she returned home that evening, the panic button hid in her palm. She felt both fearful and prepared. For the first time, every heartbeat pulsed with intention. She would use this device not just to survive, but to seize the moment of rescue when it came. As she stepped past the threshold, she whispered her code, Red Rose. And she knew she was no longer defenseless. 2 days later, Zina shopped at the local market for fabrics. Bright Ankara prints and luxurious brocades fluttered around her fingertips. She bartered with stall owners while carefully watching the crowd. Suddenly, a soft voice called her name. Zina turned to see Ada, Chuka's ex-girlfriend, emerging from behind a stack of textiles. Ada's eyes were wary. Zina, she said, voice low. Can I speak with you? Curiosity warred with fear. Zina nodded and followed Ada into a quieter corner. Ada glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. Chuka used to hit me too, she said, pain flickering across her face. He was charming, loving, then dangerous. Zina's stomach clenched. But I thought you moved on. Ada shook her head. I ran away. I left the country. She produced a battered notebook. I recorded everything, dates, threats, bruises. She handed it to Zina. Keep this safe. You're not alone. Zina accepted the notebook, shock rippling through her. Why now? For you, Ada said simply. I couldn't live with what I did to help him once. You deserve a fighting chance. Zina clutched the pages, each line a lifeline. Ada stepped back, eyes glistening. Be careful, she warned. He'll never stop unless someone stops him. Then Ada melted into the crowd. Zina stood frozen, the weight of Ada's words sinking in. She fingered the spiral binding. Ada had risked appearing in public to warn her. Zina's eyes filled with new determination. That evening, Zina shared the notebook with F and Inspector Boma. They cross-referenced Ada's entries with Zina's own records. Each matched bruises Zina had concealed, each corroborated dates of assaults. Boma smiled grimly. This is powerful evidence. As Zina locked the notebook in her hidden drawer, she felt less like a victim and more like a survivor. Ada's courage had become her own. And with every warning, Zina's resolve hardened. Soon her story would end in justice, not silence. Zina sat at her sewing machine, stitching a hem on a tailor-made blouse. The rhythmic click of the needle calmed her. Her phone rested beside her, panic button integrated into its case. Suddenly it rang, Chuka's name flashing on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. Hello. A muffled voice spoke on the other end. Zina recognized Mr. Aini's polite tone. He asked for Chuka. Zina swallowed. He's not here, she said, voice steady. Can I take a message? Yes, please. Dammy's tone wavered. It's urgent. Please have him call me back. She ended the call and set the phone down. Moments later, tears rippled through her chest as she recalled every snapped cuff, every screamed apology. Late that afternoon, Chuka returned, keys clattering. He glanced at her serene expression. Who called? Dammy, Zina replied calmly. He wanted an update on the Lagos expansion. Chuka frowned, tension radiating from him. You're lying. He lunged for her phone. Zina stood protectively over it. Let go, she warned quietly. He yanked it from her hand, pressing it to his ear. On speaker, Dammy's voice roared, Chuka, I heard screams. Zina's blood ran cold as the phone fell from Chuka's grip. In the background, her own panicked cry echoed. The call cut off. Chuka stared at her, face contorted like a wounded animal. Zina took a step back, panic button clenched in her fist. She whispered into the air, "Red Rose." Within seconds, distant sirens wailed. Chuka's shoulders slumped as dread dawned in his eyes. Zina felt an ember of triumph spark in her chest. For the first time, someone had truly heard her cry, and help was on the way. When the door burst open, Inspector Boma and 2 officers flooded in. Chuka froze, guilt and terror painted across his face. Zina stood tall, phone in hand, evidence documented, ready to reclaim her life. Zina hovered by the door, heart thundering as she placed the final stitch in her secret sewing project. It was late afternoon when Chuka's car pulled into the driveway, earlier than usual. She hid the fabric under a quilt and smoothed her blouse before opening the door. Standing on the threshold was Mr. Damilola Aini. His polished shoes and neat tie marked him unmistakably as Chuka's boss, yet his eyes were fixed on Zina with quiet concern rather than authority. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Okafor," Dami said softly, raising a folder in one hand. His voice trembled with restraint. "I left these documents here yesterday." He paused, glancing past her into the dim living room. Faint bruises colored Zina's cheekbone and collarbone. She fancied she saw understanding flicker in his gaze before he masked it. "Thank you," Zina managed, stepping aside. Her pulse hammered as Dami crossed once into the house, hand tight on the files. Chuka appeared from the study, suit jacket draped over one arm. His smile was smooth. "Dami. Glad you came back. Wanted to hear more about your expansion plan." He extended a hand. Dami shook it stiffly. "Just the files," Dami said, voice low enough that only Zina could hear. He looked at Chuka, then at Zina, eyes speaking volumes. Chuka cleared his throat and led Dami toward the study. Zina hovered, stomach twisting with unease, and something like hope. Perhaps someone had seen the truth. Inside the study, Dami handed over the documents. Chuka's practiced charm returned instantly. He clapped Dami on the shoulder. "Would you like a drink?" he offered. Dami declined. As Chuka busied himself fetching glasses, Dami turned and looked at Zina again, his eyes dark with empathy. For a moment, Zina felt seen in every bruised curve of her body. Chuka reappeared, 2 tumblers in hand. He set one before Dami. "Sorry about this mess," he said, sweeping a hand at the scattered files. "My wife has been helping me organize." He smiled at Zina, an expression far too bright. Zina forced her own smile as she accepted a glass, feeling Chuka's eyes on her like a blade. Dami took a sip, then cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said, pocketing both glass and folder. He turned to Zina. "Good evening, Mrs. Okafor." His tone lingered on her bruised cheek. Zina nodded, swallowing. He slipped out of the study without another word. At the door he paused. "I hope you're well," he said quietly, then disappeared into the hallway. Zina closed the heavy door and leaned against it, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Chuka strolled past her, draping an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" he murmured, voice deceptively gentle. Zina's mind raced. Dami had seen. Something inside her shifted, a spark of courage igniting among the ashes of her fear. She pressed a hand to her bruised cheek and met Chuka's gaze. He paused, puzzled by the glint in her eyes. That night, as Zina lay in bed beside him, she couldn't sleep. Dami's silent visit replayed in her mind. A witness, an ally. The walls of her isolation trembled. For the first time in years, Zina dared to believe she might not be alone after all. Zina tiptoed into the kitchen an hour later, hoping the house had finally quieted. She carried a single plate of leftover stew on a china dish, Chuka's favorite, and balanced it carefully under the dim light. Her mind buzzed with Dami's visit. The way Dami's eyes had lingered on her bruises, the unspoken promise he left behind. As she stepped toward the table, her robe brushed against the sink's edge. The dish tipped, crashing to the tiled floor with a violent shatter. Zina gasped, dropping to her knees among shards of porcelain and dark plum soup. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, heart hammering. Chuka's voice boomed from the corridor. "What on earth?" He appeared in the doorway, suit rumpled. His eyes burned with irritation as he registered the broken plate and the tremor in Zina's limbs. "Clumsy," he spat. Zina bit her lip. "I'm sorry," her voice cracked. She leaned forward to gather shards, ignoring the crimson stain spreading across her palm from a cut on her finger. Chuka swept into the kitchen, seized Zina's arm and yanked her upright. "Watch what you're doing." His hand caught her chin, forcing her face toward him. "You're an embarrassment." A wave of fear and anger collided in Zena's chest. She tried to pull away but Chuka's grip tightened. The cut on her palm throbbed. Before she could cry out, he raised his other hand and it came down sharply across her cheek. Pain exploded against her skin. Zena stumbled, tears pricking her eyes. Chuka snarled, "You ruin everything." He cuffed her again, harder this time, sending her reeling backwards into the counter. A heavy pot overturned, clanging loudly. Zena's vision blurred, she tasted copper. Her breathing jagged, Zena sank to the floor, clutching her wounded cheek and bleeding palm. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to hide, to slip into silence, but she couldn't. She pressed her free hand inside her robe pocket and fumbled for the panic button. The moment her thumb brushed the cool surface of the device, she pressed it hard. The panic button emitted a soft beep. Outside, the world continued its hush, until distant sirens shattered the night. Chuka froze, horror dawning on his face as he realized what she had done. Zena closed her eyes against the tears and blood, leaning against the cabinet. The pounding of her heart was the only sound until she heard footsteps approaching from the front door. The front door burst inward before Zena could rise. Dammy filled the threshold, eyes wide with shock. Behind him, Inspector Boma and two uniformed officers fanned out into the entryway. Chuka stood rigid, one hand raised halfway, the other clenched into a fist. His shirt was stained red where Zena's blood had spattered. He stared at Dammy with incredulous fury. Zena lay huddled on the kitchen floor, cheeks slick with tears and blood. She blinked up at Dammy, her panic-button savior, as he took a quick step forward and surveyed the scene. "Don't move," Dammy commanded, tone unexpectedly firm. He nodded to the officers. "She's been badly hurt." An officer crouched beside Zena, gently lifting her wrist to inspect the cut. Another snapped on gloves and began photographing her injuries. Zena felt relief and shame mingle in her chest as the evidence was recorded. Chuka's jaw clenched. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, voice cracking. Inspector Boma stepped forward. "Go stand in the living room," she ordered calmly. "We need to talk." Chuka obeyed, lurching backward as though in a daze. Boma turned to Zena. "Are you hurt worse than this?" Zena lifted her chin. "I'm okay," she whispered, though every breath stung. F, who had slipped in behind the officers, knelt and wrapped Zena's hand in a clean cloth. She pressed a gentle finger against Zena's head, reassuring her. Dammy watched Chuka in the doorway. The man looked small now, exposed before everyone. Dammy's jaw set. "You're going to answer for this," he said quietly. Zena inhaled through her nose, chest filling with a steady calm. No longer invisible, she was heard at last. Chuka's face contorted with rage as Inspector Boma flicked on a small flashlight, directing its beam into his eyes. "Step forward," she instructed. He stammered. She fell." Boma held up a hand. "Save it. You assaulted your wife. You broke her plate in her face." She motioned to an officer. "Secure him." The officer cuffed Chuka's wrists behind his back. His shoulders sagged as he realized the mask was shattered. Neighbors peered through windows. Mama Ife appeared at the door, specter of concern. Boma turned to Zena, kneeling beside her. "We'll take you to the hospital. Then you'll file your statement." Zena nodded, voice small but steady. "Okay." Dammy hovered in the background, eyes on Zena. His presence offered an unspoken apology for every moment he'd stayed silent. He stepped forward, lifting Zena gently to her feet. "Let's get you out of here," he said. Chuka's muffled curses trailed behind as officers marched him toward the patrol car. Zena watched in muted shock, and something like triumph, as the door swung shut on her nightmare. The red and blue strobe of police cruisers painted the living room in mottled colors as Zena sat on the couch, wrapped in a warm blanket. An ambulance stretcher waited nearby. Mama Ife squeezed her hand. F hovered with a small bag of belongings. Inspector Boma reviewed notes on her tablet. "We'll take her statement once she's examined," she said. "You did well, Zena." Though her head pounded and her cheek felt numb, Zena felt remarkably clear. She inhaled the antiseptic tang in the air, steeped in relief. Chuka's battered form was loaded into the back of a patrol car, disappearing into the night. Dammy stood by the open front window. His face was drawn but relieved. Zena met his gaze and gave a small nod. He closed his eyes as though letting her strength return to him. Outside, the neighbors murmured behind drawn curtains. Mama Ife stepped forward. "You are brave," she said, voice quivering. Zena managed a weak smile. "I had to be." As the paramedics wheeled her toward the ambulance, she paused at the threshold. Blue lights danced across her bruised skin. Xena realized the lights were not just colors of danger. They were beacons of safety, signaling that someone truly saw her pain and answered her silent plea. Her heart fluttered with a cautious hope. For the first time in years, every flash of blue meant rescue, not severity. She climbed aboard, ready to begin a new chapter, one where her story was not defined by silence, but by her emergence into the light. Xena woke to fluorescent lights and the soft hum of an electric fan. She lay on a narrow cot, crisp white sheets tucked around her. The shelter's common room was silent except for distant voices and the rustle of fabric. Mama Aoife sat beside her, holding a thermos of tea. She poured a cup and handed it to Xena. "Good morning," she said, voice gentle. Xena cradled the mug, grateful for its warmth. She sipped slowly, letting the flavor calm her racing thoughts. Across the room, F organized donated clothes on a rack. Inspector Boma conversed quietly with a counselor, glancing over supportive pamphlets. Damiani entered, carrying a fresh folder of documents. He offered Xena a polite nod and placed the folder on a small table by her bed. Xena opened it to reveal paperwork for protective orders, witness statements, and counseling resources. Her heart ached with relief and lingering fear. She had never imagined navigating a system so complex. The counselor introduced herself as Ms. Akudo. She guided Xena down a corridor lined with pastel walls and framed inspirational quotes. Xena paused at each quote. "Courage is not absence of fear," read one. "Healing begins when you are heard," read another. Ms. Akudo led her into a small office where comfortable chairs faced each other. "Tell me about your dreams," she said. Xena hesitated. Dreams felt dangerous. Then she spoke. She described nights of dread, days of doubt, and long-forgotten hopes of freedom. As she spoke, tears welled and then receded. Each word seemed to lift a weight from her chest. After the session, Xena joined a support group of women, each nursing their own scars. They shared stories of escape and new beginnings. One woman whispered, "I never thought I could sing again," and they all hummed a fragile melody together. Xena found herself smiling through tears. She realized pain could connect and heal. Later, Dami returned with lunch from Xena's favorite spot, a bowl of peppered chicken and jollof rice. He placed it in front of her. "I thought you might want something familiar," he said, watching her gratefully. "Thank you," Xena managed. His presence felt safe, his kindness genuine. They talked quietly about next steps: court dates, housing options, vocational training. Xena felt a spark of possibility ignite within her. That afternoon, Mama Aoife helped Xena choose a small room within the shelter that would become her sanctuary. It had a single bed, a small desk, and a window overlooking a garden courtyard. Xena arranged fresh flowers on the desk, breathing in their fragrance. She spread her journal and favorite pen beside them. She closed the window and locked the door, a ritual that made her heart flutter with cautious hope. That night, Xena lay in her new room, propped on soft pillows. The shelter's walls felt protective, not confining. She whispered into the stillness, "I am safe." And for the first time in 3 years, Xena fell asleep trusting she would remain so, completely safe. Xena stood outside the ornate wooden doors of the Bagata High Courtroom, heart drumming against her ribs as she clutched her folder. Warm morning light filtered through tall windows, casting lattice patterns on polished marble. Mama Aoife and F sat in the front row, their eyes brimming with quiet encouragement, while Damiani hovered near the entrance, offering a steady presence in her world. At the command of the bailiff, "All rise," Xena smoothed the crisp lines of her navy blue blazer and rose to her feet. Judge Olabunmi entered, her dignified black robes whispering softly against the floor. The judge's stern gaze swept the gallery, pausing briefly on Xena before she took her seat on the bench. The courtroom fell into silence as Xena moved to the witness stand. Mr. Ogdeng, a seasoned defense attorney, approached with steely confidence. "Good morning," he began, voice practiced and calm. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Xena straightened her spine. "I do." Her voice was steady, each word weighed with conviction. "Describe the evening in question," he prompted. Xena inhaled, recalling every detail. "I was in my kitchen chopping peppers for stew when Chuka burst in, furious over a broken plate. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, then struck me with his open hand. I fell against the counter, my cheek burning, and my palm split on the ceramic shards." She held up a photograph. Exhibit A. The jurors leaned forward to see the vivid purple bruise. The defense challenged her credibility. "Is it possible you misremembered?" Mr. Ogdeng asked, arching an eyebrow. Zina shook her head. No. These scars match the medical report in Exhibit B, she replied, pushing forward the hospital document. She noted the nurse's typed observations and signature. Next, Mama Ife took the stand. As a retired nurse, she described how she first noticed Zina's fresh wounds and trembling during an unannounced visit. She looked terrified, she testified. Her lip was swollen, and she hesitated whenever her husband spoke. The judge nodded gravely. F followed, presenting Zina's journal entries as Exhibit C. She read aloud passages chronicling escalating violence and broken apologies. The words echoed in the hush of the courtroom, each line a testament to Zina's hidden suffering. Finally, Dami Aini provided the watershed moment. He recounted overhearing Zina's panic button call and rushing into her apartment to find her battered and bleeding. Blood pooled beneath her, he said softly. His composed testimony underscored the gravity of the situation. When all witnesses finished, the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation. The room exhaled. Zina returned to Mama Ife and F, who embraced her gently. Though exhausted, Zina felt a surge of relief. She had faced the courtroom stare, and spoken her truth under oath, her voice unwavering in pursuit of justice. The courtroom reconvened as the prosecution presented a layered tapestry of evidence. Detective Olumide carried a folder marked Exhibit D. He laid out 12 printed photographs on the evidence table and explained each image. Each photograph had been time-stamped and watermarked to prevent tampering. These images document Zina's injuries, he said. They include a swollen cheek, a stitched laceration on her palm, and multiple bruises along her ribs. The jurors studied the pictures in silence. Next, Dr. Salome Idris, Zina's attending physician, took the stand with Exhibit E. She described treating the palm wound with stitches, performing scans to rule out fractures and administering pain medication. My report details the timing and severity of her injuries, she testified, holding up the printed medical document. Exhibit E was entered without objection. Then the court listened to the recorded emergency call, labeled Exhibit F. Zina's trembling voice pleaded, "Please help me, I'm afraid." Dami's urgent reply followed, "Send help now to 14 Ajo Street." The crackling sound of approaching sirens faded in and out. The raw urgency left jurors leaning forward in their seats. The defense objected, calling the recording's authenticity into question. Judge Olabunmi ordered a forensic review but allowed Exhibit F to remain on the record. Inspector Boma detailed the chain of custody, explaining how the panic button device transmitted the audio directly to a secure server, preserving every byte. Her clear testimony quelled doubts. The prosecutor then introduced Zina's journal entries as Exhibit G. Zina's neat handwriting chronicled each episode of abuse, noting dates, times, and her emotional state. The prosecutor read a passage. His voice was thunder. "I thought the walls would fall on me." The courtroom absorbed the words, each one a pulse in Zina's survival story. Finally, the prosecutor presented Exhibit H, text messages between Zina and F, urging her to use the panic button and seek help. One message read, "If he hurts you again, press the red rose." These messages underscored the network of support Zina had quietly built. By midday the evidence rested. Judge Olabunmi pored over each exhibit, her thoughtful gaze reflecting the weight of documented truth. When the defense began its counterarguments, Mr. Ogdeng struggled to redirect the focus. The echoes of photographs, medical records, audio journals, and texts lingered in the courtroom air, forming an unshakable testament to Zina's courage. The jury filed back into the courtroom, their faces solemn. Zina sat in the gallery beside Mama Ife, F, and Dami, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Chuka sat at the defendant's table, his expression a mask of dread. Judge Olabunmi rose and addressed the jurors. "Have you reached a verdict?" she asked. Their foreperson stood. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson handed a slip of paper to the bailiff. Every heartbeat thundered in Zina's ears as the bailiff handed the verdict to the judge. Judge Olabunmi unfolded it and read aloud, "We the jury find the defendant, Chuka Okafor, guilty on all counts." A collective exhale swept the courtroom. Zina closed her eyes, relief and emotion flooding her. She felt Mama Ife's arm wrap around her shoulders and F's comforting squeeze. Dami offered a proud smile. Acquitted of doubt, convicted of truth, Zina let herself weep, tears of grief for lost years and gratitude for newfound justice. Chuka slumped in his chair, shoulders heavy as officers approached to take him into custody. His eyes met Zena's briefly, filled with defeat and shame. He mouthed a word that might have been sorry, but the moment held no power now. The mask had shattered. Judge Olabunmi addressed Zena directly. "You are free in every sense," she said quietly. "May you rebuild in safety and strength." Zena nodded, voice catching as she whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." As Chuka was led away, Zena stood with her supporters. Flashbulbs from the press reflected her triumphant silhouette. Today justice had been served. In every recorded image, every held testimony, and every echo of her own voice, Zena found not just vindication, but the promise of a future reclaimed from years of silence. Months later, Zena sat behind the counter of her small tailoring boutique in a bright corner shop. Sunlight danced across mannequins adorned in her custom designs. A sign above read, "Zena's Creations," the letters newly painted in bold, hopeful colors, her own name reclaimed. Her hands moved confidently over fabric as she stitched details into a wedding gown for a bride-to-be. Each stitch symbolized another step away from fear. Mama Ife and F visited often, bringing fresh flowers and cups of mint tea. Dami Aini dropped by, not as a boss but as a friend, admiring her workmanship and offering business advice. Zena smiled at her reflection in the shop's window. The bruise had long faded, the scars inside felt soft when remembered. She ran a finger along the smooth satin of the gown and realized she had turned pain into purpose. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Market vendors called greetings, children darted through alleys, and neighbors paused to congratulate her success. Zena stepped into the afternoon breeze, inhaling freedom. She clasped her hands over her heart and whispered, "I am strong." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Zena locked the shop door and paused for a moment under the golden glow of the street lamp. Her journey, filled with betrayal, survival, and justice, had led her here. She raised her head, breathed deeply, and walked into her bright new life, ready at last to author her own story. Liked it? Thumbs up, subscribe, and join the AfriHeart fam. Your support fuels our stories. Until next time.